babysitter discovered strange marks on an 8-year-old girl's arms while giving her a bath. When she confronted the parents, their reaction was terrifying. The autumn breeze carried the scent of burning leaves through Oak Ridge as Michelle Calloway walked up the cobblestone path to the Thornton residence. The colonial home stood proud and impeccable against the backdrop of maple trees ablaze with orange and crimson. 3 stories of pristine white siding, black shutters without a speck of chipped paint, and a front door the color of wine. It was the kind of home featured in architectural magazines, the kind she could only dream of affording as a graduate student drowning in student loans. Michelle adjusted her messenger bag and smoothed down her cardigan before pressing the doorbell. The chime echoed inside, a melodious tone that seemed too perfect, like everything else about the Thorntons. At 24, Michelle was older than most of the undergraduate babysitters in Oak Ridge, but her graduate studies in child psychology at Westfield University made her particularly attractive to affluent families, especially ones like the Thorntons who could afford to be selective. The door swung open to reveal Diana Thornton, an elegant woman in her early 40s with a sleek blonde bob and eyes the color of steel. She wore a charcoal pencil skirt and cream silk blouse that probably cost more than Michelle's monthly rent. "Michelle, right on time," Diana said, her smile professional but not quite reaching her eyes. "Come in." The foyer opened into a grand living room with soaring ceilings and a massive stone fireplace. The decor was minimalist but clearly expensive: glass and chrome, white leather, abstract art in muted colors. Nothing looked touched, much less lived in. "Richard is just finishing a call in his study," Diana explained, leading Michelle through the house. "We appreciate you stepping in on such short notice. Our regular sitter had some sort of family emergency." Michelle nodded. "I'm happy to help. Professor Lee mentioned you were looking for someone with my background." "Yes, Mary and is a very particular child. Bright, of course, but quiet. We prefer someone who understands child development rather than just a teenager who will plop her in front of a television." They entered the kitchen, a showcase of marble and stainless steel. A man stood with his back to them, speaking in hushed tones on a cell phone. He turned as they approached, ending his call with a curt, "We'll discuss the results tomorrow." Dr. Richard Thornton was as polished as his wife, tall and fit, with salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. His smile was practiced and perfect, the smile of someone accustomed to putting others at ease. "Dr. Calloway, I presume?" he said, extending his hand. "Or soon to be, I should say." Michelle shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "Just Michelle is fine. I'm still a few years from finishing my doctorate." "Well, anyone Marissa Lee recommends comes with the highest credentials, doctorate or not." He glanced at his watch. "Mary and should be finishing her piano practice. Let me introduce you." They moved deeper into the house, passing rooms that looked more like museum exhibits than living spaces. Michelle noticed there were few family photos displayed, mainly artistic black and white portraits that revealed little personality. The music room was at the back of the house, flooded with afternoon light from floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking an immaculate garden. A small figure sat at a glossy black grand piano, her posture perfect as her fingers moved mechanically over the keys. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room, played with technical precision but little emotion. "Mary Ann," Richard called softly as the piece ended. "Come meet Michelle. She'll be looking after you tonight while Mother and I attend the hospital fundraiser." The girl turned on the bench, and Michelle's trained eye immediately caught the subtle signs of anxiety, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clasped together, the momentary flicker of assessment in her gaze before she composed her features into a polite smile. Mary Ann Thornton was small for 8, with pale blonde hair pulled back in a tight braid and delicate features that mirrored her mother's. Despite the warm September weather, she wore a long-sleeved navy dress with a white collar. Her eyes, large and blue, seemed older than her years. "Hello, Miss Michelle," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michelle approached slowly, crouching down to meet the girl at eye level. "Hi, Mary Ann. That was beautiful playing. How long have you been taking lessons?" "Since I was 4, the girl replied, her eyes darting briefly to her father before returning to Michelle. Father says I have an aptitude for classical composition. Richard beamed with precisely the right amount of paternal pride. Mary and has perfect pitch. Her instructor believes she could be performing with the youth symphony by next year. Michelle noticed how Mary Ann's shoulders tensed slightly at this pronouncement. That's impressive. Do you enjoy playing? Before Mary Ann could answer, Diana interjected. We should finish getting ready, Richard. The silent auction begins at 7, and you're presenting the research grant at 8:30. Of course. Richard turned to Michelle. Emergency numbers are on the refrigerator. Mary Ann's bedtime is 9 o'clock sharp, after she's completed her reading assignment. No television, no sweets, and she's already had her dinner. Diana added, she's allowed 30 minutes of drawing time after homework if she behaves. She knows the rules. Throughout this exchange, Mary Ann remained perfectly still, her expression carefully neutral. Only someone trained to notice would see the slight withdrawal, the barely perceptible retreat into herself. We shouldn't be later than 11, Diana continued, already moving toward the master suite. Mary Ann, show Michelle your homework while we finish getting ready. Left alone with the child, Michelle sat beside her on the piano bench. What are you reading for your assignment? Mary Ann slid off the bench and walked to a neat stack of books on a nearby desk. The Secret Garden, she said softly. I'm supposed to read chapters 7 and 8 tonight and write a paragraph about the symbolism of the robin. That's a wonderful book, Michelle said warmly. One of my favorites when I was your age. Mary Ann glanced up, a flash of genuine interest crossing her face before she controlled it. Did you like when Mary found the key? I did. I loved the idea that there were secret, magical places waiting to be discovered. Michelle smiled. What do you think of it so far? I like when Mary stands up to Colin, she said, so quietly Michelle had to lean in to hear. When she tells him he's not really sick, just afraid. Something in the way she said it made Michelle's professional instincts flare. Before she could probe further, the sound of heels clicking on hardwood announced Diana's return. The Thorntons' departure was efficient and brief. Diana gave instructions about where to find Mary Ann's pajamas and toothbrush. Richard reminded Michelle of their return time. Neither of them hugged or kissed their daughter goodbye, simply nodding in her direction with a reminder to be good. As the front door closed, Michelle felt the atmosphere in the house shift subtly. Mary Ann's posture, still perfect, nonetheless seemed less rigid. Should we look at your homework first? Michelle suggested. The next hour passed quietly as Mary Ann worked through math problems with mechanical efficiency. Michelle observed how the girl triple-checked each answer, erasing and rewriting numbers that were already correct until the paper was nearly worn through. When Michelle gently suggested that her first answer had been right, Mary Ann had frozen momentarily before whispering, Father says I need to be certain. After homework came the reading assignment. Mary Ann read beautifully, her diction perfect, but her engagement with the story seemed detached until Michelle asked her opinion about the characters. Then, briefly, animation would flicker across her features before disappearing again, as if she'd remembered she shouldn't show too much enthusiasm. By 8:30, Mary Ann had completed everything required of her. You've earned your drawing time, Michelle said. What do you like to draw? For the first time, a genuine smile appeared on Mary Ann's face. Can I show you my sketchbook? She disappeared upstairs and returned with a well-worn book bound in blue fabric. Opening it revealed page after page of surprisingly sophisticated drawings for an 8-year-old, detailed birds, flowers, and landscapes rendered with careful attention. Mary Ann, these are amazing, Michelle said honestly. You have a real talent. The girl ducked her head but couldn't hide her pleasure. I like drawing things I see outside my window. That's my favorite tree, she said, pointing to a detailed sketch of an oak. I named him Old Keeper because he keeps all the seasons in his branches. It was the most words Mary Ann had strung together since Michelle's arrival, and they revealed the imaginative child beneath the controlled exterior. Do your parents see your drawings? Mary Ann's smile faded. Mother says art is a hobby, not a career. Father lets me draw if I've done everything else correctly. Michelle watched as Mary Ann selected a fresh page and began sketching with light, precise strokes. The girl seemed to retreat into the process, her focus absolute. Several times, Michelle noticed her unconsciously rubbing her upper arms, as if soothing an ache. "Are you cold, Mary Ann? I could adjust the thermostat." The girl stiffened, immediately dropping her hands to her lap. "No, thank you. I'm fine." At 9 o'clock precisely, without being prompted, Mary Ann closed her sketchbook. "It's bedtime now," she announced, her voice returning to its whisper. Michelle followed her upstairs to a bedroom that, like the rest of the house, was impeccably arranged. The walls were painted a soft blue, with educational posters framed in silver. The bookshelf contained classics and science texts, sorted by height and subject. There were few toys visible: a wooden chess set, a globe, and a single porcelain doll that looked too fragile to play with. "Would you like to take a bath before bed?" Michelle asked, remembering Diana's brief mention of Mary Ann's nighttime routine. A flicker of something anxiety crossed the girl's face. "I usually do, but maybe not tonight." Michelle's training told her to pay attention to this resistance. "Is there a reason you don't want to? It's okay to tell me." Mary Ann looked down at her socked feet. "I'm just tired." "A quick bath might help you sleep better," Michelle suggested gently. "I promise I'll make it fast." After a moment's hesitation, Mary Ann nodded and moved to her dresser, retrieving neatly folded pajamas and a robe. The bathroom attached to Mary Ann's bedroom was as pristine as everything else in the Thornton home. Michelle ran the water, noticing how Mary Ann carefully tested the temperature before nodding her approval. "I can do it myself," Mary Ann said when the tub was filled. "I'm very capable." Michelle smiled. "I'm sure you are, but I'll stay just to make sure you're okay. I can turn around if you want privacy while you get in." The girl hesitated again, longer this time, before slowly nodding. Michelle turned her back, listening to the soft sounds of clothing being removed and the gentle splash as Mary Ann entered the water. "You can look now," came the quiet voice. Michelle turned back to find Mary Ann sitting in the tub, bubbles covering her body, arms curled protectively around her knees. Her long sleeves had hidden arms that were impossibly thin, making her appear even more fragile than Michelle had first thought. "Would you like me to wash your hair?" Michelle offered. "No." The forceful response seemed to surprise even Mary Ann. More softly, she added, "I mean, no thank you. I washed it yesterday." Michelle nodded, respecting the boundary while noting the unusual reaction. She sat on the closed toilet lid, making casual conversation about school and books as Mary Ann methodically washed herself, keeping her arms mostly beneath the bubbles. It happened when Mary Ann reached for the washcloth that had slipped away. Her right arm extended fully, water and soap sliding away to reveal what had been hidden beneath the long sleeves all day. Michelle fought to keep her expression neutral despite the shock that jolted through her system. A series of perfectly circular marks lined the inside of Mary Ann's arm, some faded to yellow, others still purple and fresh. They weren't random bruises from play or accidents. They were deliberate, uniform, and placed in a near-surgical pattern. Mary Ann saw her looking and quickly submerged her arm, but it was too late. Their eyes met, the girls wide with fear. "Mary Ann," Michelle said, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. "Can you tell me what happened to your arm?" The girl shook her head frantically. "Nothing. I fell at ballet." The rehearsed quality of the response was unmistakable. Michelle had heard similar explanations in her child psychology courses, the textbook answers abuse victims are trained to give. "That must have been quite a fall," Michelle said gently. "Those marks look painful." "I'm fine," Mary Ann insisted, but her voice trembled. "Can I get out now? I'm clean." Michelle handed her a towel, mind racing through protocols and ethical obligations. As Mary Ann dressed with her back turned, Michelle caught another glimpse of marks disappearing beneath the collar of her pajama top. Back in the bedroom, Mary Ann climbed into bed with the careful movements of someone working around pain. Michelle sat on the edge of the bed, conflicted about how to proceed. Confronting Mary and directly might shut her down completely, but ignoring what she'd seen was unconscionable. Mary and, she began carefully, you know that as a grown-up who works with children, it's my job to make sure you're safe, right? The girl's face went blank in a way that spoke of practiced self-protection. I am safe. Those marks on your arms? I have a condition. Mary and interrupted, the words coming out in a practiced rush. Father says it makes me bruise easily. He's a doctor, so he knows. Michelle nodded, not challenging the explanation yet. It looks uncomfortable. Does it hurt? A tiny hesitation. Sometimes. If someone was hurting you, Mary, and you could tell me, I would help you. Fear flashed across the girl's face. Nobody's hurting me. You can't say that. Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. They won't let you come back if you say things like that. The implication, that Mary and wanted her to come back, that others who had asked questions hadn't returned, hung in the air between them. Michelle kept her voice steady. What do you like most about the secret garden? The abrupt change of subject seemed to confuse Mary Ann, but she answered cautiously, that Mary finds friends who help her. Everyone needs friends like that, Michelle said softly. Friends who notice when something's wrong and try to help, even when it's scary. Mary Ann's eyes welled with tears she refused to let fall. Will you read to me? Just a little bit. Michelle picked up the book from the nightstand. As she read about Mary Lennox discovering the hidden garden, she noticed Mary Ann gradually relaxing, her breathing becoming deeper and more regular. By the time the chapter ended, the girl was asleep, one hand curled protectively over her opposite arm. Downstairs, Michelle moved through the silent house with growing unease. The perfect orderliness now seemed oppressive rather than impressive. In the living room, family photos showed Mary Ann at various ages, always immaculately dressed, always with the same careful smile that never reached her eyes. Michelle's ethics training was clear about her obligations if she suspected abuse, but something told her that standard procedures might not work with a family as powerful as the Thorntons. She needed more information. She found herself drawn to Richard's study, a masculine space of leather and dark wood. The door was ajar, not fully closed but not quite open, an invitation and a warning at once. Michelle hesitated only briefly before stepping inside. The room was meticulously organized. Medical journals lined custom bookshelves, certificates and awards covered one wall, and a large mahogany desk dominated the space. Michelle scanned the titles on the bookshelf, noting Richard's specialization became clear: pain management and research. On the desk lay an open journal, a passage highlighted in yellow. Pain response in pediatric subjects remains understudied due to ethical constraints. Observable physiological reactions to controlled stimuli could provide valuable insights into developing more effective pain management protocols. Michelle's stomach clenched. She carefully examined more of the desk without disturbing the precise arrangement of items. A leather-bound calendar showed regular notations of MA assessment, scheduled weekly. A medical file labeled simply Subject to was locked in a drawer that refused to open despite her careful attempts. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway startled her into motion. Michelle quickly exited the study, making sure the door was exactly as she'd found it, and moved to the kitchen just as keys rattled in the front door. Diana Thornton entered first, unwinding a silk scarf from her neck. I hope everything went smoothly? Michelle nodded, working to keep her expression neutral. Mary Ann was wonderful. She's very bright. Yes, she's quite advanced for her age. Diana's smile was practiced. Richard is just parking the car. He likes the garage to be perfectly aligned. The comment, delivered casually, struck Michelle as another indication of the control that pervaded this household. Richard entered moments later, his bow tie already loosened. How was our girl? Great, Michelle said, watching his face carefully. She finished all her homework, read her chapters, and even had time to show me her drawings. Ah, her little hobby, Richard said dismissively. We indulge it as a creative outlet, but we're focusing her talents on more practical pursuits. She's quite talented, Michelle ventured. Her understanding of perspective and detail is unusual for her age. Diana waved this away. The piano offers more structure. Drawing can't be properly measured for progress. Michelle gathered her courage. While giving Mary and her bath, I noticed some unusual marks on her arms. Circular bruises in different stages of healing. I wanted to check if everything is okay. The change was instantaneous and chilling. The polite masks slipped for just a moment. Diana's eyes hardened to ice, and Richard's smile became fixed in a way that didn't disguise the cold calculation behind it. Mary and has a rare blood disorder, Richard said, his voice taking on a clinical tone. Idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. It causes easy bruising from even minor contact. I'm surprised she didn't tell you. She understands her condition quite well. She mentioned falling at ballet, Michelle said carefully. Yes, that too, Diana interjected smoothly. Between the condition and her clumsiness at dance, she bruises quite dramatically sometimes. We've considered pulling her from ballet, but she enjoys it so much. Her smile never reached her eyes. We appreciate your concern, but I assure you, it's well managed. Richard is one of the leading experts in pediatric hematology, after all. The lie Richard was in pain management, not hematology, hung in the air, but Michelle didn't challenge it directly. I see, she said instead. The marks looked quite uniform, almost like medical testing sites, Richard interrupted. We have to monitor her platelet levels regularly. I perform the tests myself to spare her the trauma of hospital visits. Diana moved to her purse, extracting cash. We should let you get home. It's getting late, and I'm sure you have studies to attend to. She counted out bills, significantly more than the agreed-upon rate. A little extra for your thoughtfulness. The money felt heavy in Michelle's hand. Hush, money. Thank you for trusting me with Mary and, Michelle said, choosing her words carefully. I'd be happy to watch her again if you need someone. Richard and Diana exchanged a glance so brief most would miss it. We'll be in touch, Richard said, his tone making it clear they wouldn't. Dr. Lee has your information. As Diana showed her to the door, Michelle caught a glimpse of Richard heading immediately upstairs, presumably to check on Mary and to make sure she hadn't said anything she shouldn't. The night air felt cleansing after the oppressive perfection of the Thornton home. Michelle stood on the sidewalk looking back at the beautiful colonial with its warm lights and flawless exterior. Inside those walls, a little girl with sad eyes and marks on her arms was sleeping, believing no one could help her. I'll be back, Mary Ann, Michelle whispered to herself as she turned away. I promise. She couldn't know then how that promise would change both their lives forever, or the danger that would come from challenging the perfect facade of the Thornton family. But in that moment, walking away from the house where wrongness hid behind perfection, Michelle Calloway made a decision that would set in motion events from which none of them could turn back. Sleep eluded Michelle that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mary Ann's thin arms marked with those perfect circles. Too perfect, too evenly spaced to be accidents. The clinical precision haunted her. In the darkness of her small apartment, the Thorntons' explanation sounded even more hollow than it had in their immaculate kitchen. Rain tapped against her window as she finally gave up on sleep and moved to her desk, opening her laptop. The blue light illuminated her cramped studio apartment, a stark contrast to the Thorntons' pristine colonial. Textbooks stacked on every surface, coffee mugs forgotten on shelves, a futon that served as both couch and bed. Not much, but it was hers, paid for with student loans and part-time jobs. Michelle typed idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura into the search bar. The condition Richard had named so confidently was real, a disorder where the immune system destroys platelets, leading to easy bruising. But as she scrolled through medical sites, the descriptions didn't match what she'd seen. ITP caused random, irregular bruising from minor trauma, not perfectly circular marks in neat patterns. The lies were unraveling already. Her phone showed 3:42 a.m. when she finally crawled back to bed, her mind made up. Tomorrow she would speak to Dr. Lee. As her mentor and the connection to the Thorntons, the professor needed to know what Michelle had seen. Morning arrived with weak October sunlight filtering through blinds Michelle had forgotten to close. She dressed quickly, choosing a professional outfit for her meeting with Dr. Lee: charcoal slacks, a burgundy sweater, and her only pair of decent boots. Her wardrobe was limited, but today she needed to be taken seriously. Westfield University's psychology department occupied the third floor of Harrington Hall, a Gothic Revival building with narrow windows and drafty corridors. Michelle arrived early for her scheduled advisement meeting, hovering outside Dr. Lee's office until the previous student departed. Dr. Marissa Lee looked up from her notes as Michelle entered, offering a warm smile that creased the corners of her eyes. At 53, Dr. Lee was a respected figure in the field of childhood trauma research, her salt and pepper hair always perfectly coiled in a bun, her office a comfortable clutter of books, plants, and student papers. "Michelle, come in. How's the literature review coming along?" Michelle closed the door before sitting, drawing a raised eyebrow from her advisor. "It's not about my dissertation," Michelle said, her voice lower than necessary in the privacy of the office. "It's about the Thorntons. I babysat for them last night." Dr. Lee's smile faded. She removed her reading glasses, setting them deliberately on her desk. "I see. How did that go?" "Not well." Michelle leaned forward. "Dr. Lee, I found marks on Mary Ann's arms. Circular bruises in different stages of healing, arranged in patterns. When I asked her about them, she gave a rehearsed response about falling at ballet. When I mentioned it to her parents, they claim she has ITP, but the marks don't match that condition at all." Dr. Lee's expression remained carefully neutral. "The Thorntons are a prominent family in Oak Ridge. Richard is well respected in the medical community." "I know who they are," Michelle said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "But something is wrong in that house." Mary Ann flinches at sudden movements. She triple-checks her homework for errors that don't exist. She speaks in whispers and watches her parents for cues before answering simple questions. The professor sighed, removing a stray pin from her bun and repositioning it with deliberate care. "What exactly are you suggesting, Michelle?" "I think Dr. Thornton is experimenting on his daughter." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. "I saw research in his study about pediatric pain responses. The marks on Mary Ann's arms looked like test sites." Dr. Lee was silent for a long moment. "That's an extraordinary claim. Did Mary Ann say her father was hurting her?" "Not directly, but did you see any equipment or devices that would support your theory?" "No, but I found medical journals with highlighted passages about pain responses in children, and a locked drawer I couldn't access, and—" "So you were searching their private property?" Dr. Lee's tone sharpened. Michelle faltered. "I was concerned for Mary Ann's welfare." "Michelle." Dr. Lee's voice gentled. "I understand your concern. Your sensitivity to children's well-being is what makes you a promising psychologist. But you need to be careful about making accusations without sufficient evidence." "The evidence is on Mary Ann's body," Michelle insisted. "And there's a medical explanation for it, provided by a doctor." Dr. Lee held up a hand as Michelle began to protest. "I'm not dismissing your concerns, but remember what we've discussed in your ethics seminars about confirmation bias. You saw something concerning and your mind created a narrative to explain it." Michelle felt her cheeks flush. "This isn't confirmation bias. I know what I saw. What you saw were bruises that could have multiple explanations. What you're suggesting would mean a respected physician is deliberately harming his own child. That kind of claim requires extraordinary evidence. So I should just ignore it? Pretend I didn't see anything wrong?" Dr. Lee shook her head. "No, but you should proceed cautiously and ethically. If you genuinely believe Mary Ann is in danger, there are proper channels. Have you considered contacting Child Protective Services? Would they investigate someone like Dr. Thornton based on my word alone? They're obligated to investigate all credible reports." Dr. Lee pulled a notepad forward and wrote something down. "Here's the number for the regional CPS office. If you make a report, be specific about what you observed, not what you suspect." Michelle took the paper, feeling simultaneously validated and dismissed. "Thank you." Dr. Lee's expression softened. "Michelle, I'm not saying you're wrong, just that accusations against families like the Thorntons have consequences, for them and for the accuser. Proceed thoughtfully. The warning was clear enough. Outside, the campus had come alive with students hurrying between classes. Michelle found a quiet bench beneath a maple tree, its leaves a fiery orange against the gray sky. The CPS number felt heavy in her pocket. Her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for your help last night. Mary and mentioned you read to her. We won't need your services again, but wanted to extend our appreciation." Diana Thornton. The formal dismissal wasn't surprising, but it complicated matters. Without access to Mary, and how could Michelle gather more evidence? She stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Finally, she typed, "I enjoyed meeting Mary Ann. She's a remarkable child. Please let me know if you need help again in the future. Send." Keep the door open, however slightly. The regional CPS office was located in a nondescript government building downtown. Michelle had debated calling first, but decided a face-to-face meeting would carry more weight. She signed in at the reception desk and waited 43 minutes before being shown to a small office where a tired-looking woman introduced herself as Valerie Santos, intake coordinator. "I understand you have concerns about a child's welfare," Miss Santos said, opening a new file on her computer. Michelle nodded, collecting her thoughts. "Yes, I was babysitting for a family in Oak Ridge yesterday, and I observed concerning injuries on their 8-year-old daughter." "What kind of injuries?" "Circular bruises on her arms and upper back, in various stages of healing. They were uniform in size and appeared to be arranged in a pattern." Ms. Santos typed without looking up. "Did the child explain the injuries?" "She said she fell at ballet practice, but the explanation doesn't match the marks. They're too regular, too precise." "And the parents? Did they have an explanation?" Michelle hesitated. "The father claimed she has a blood disorder called ITP that causes easy bruising. But I've researched it, and ITP causes random bruising, not perfectly circular marks in patterns." Ms. Santos finally looked up. "The father is a medical professional?" "Yes, Dr. Richard Thornton. He's the chief of pain management at Oak Ridge Memorial." Something flashed across Ms. Santos's face. Recognition, hesitation. Michelle couldn't tell which. "I see." She typed something else. "And you're a babysitter?" "I'm a graduate student in child psychology at Westfield. I specialize in childhood trauma and abuse detection." "But you're not a licensed psychologist or social worker?" "Not yet, no." Ms. Santos nodded, continuing to type. "What other concerns did you observe besides the bruising?" Michelle detailed Mary Ann's behavior, the flinching, the whispering, the anxious perfectionism, the rehearsed responses. "Would you say these behaviors are definitively indicative of abuse? Or could they have other explanations?" "They're consistent with a traumatized child," Michelle said carefully. "In combination with the physical marks, I believe there's cause for serious concern." Ms. Santos finished typing and looked directly at Michelle. "We'll open an investigation based on your report. A caseworker will conduct a home visit to assess the situation. I should warn you that these cases can be complex, especially with families that have resources." Meaning Dr. Thornton will likely have documentation for his daughter's condition, and families like theirs tend to present well to investigators. She said it matter-of-factly, neither cynical nor apologetic. "We'll do our due diligence, but you should prepare yourself for the possibility that we may not find actionable evidence." Michelle left feeling both relieved and unsettled. The system was responding, but Ms. Santos's warning echoed Dr. Lee's caution. Families like the Thorntons knew how to deflect scrutiny. 3 days passed with no word from CPS. Michelle threw herself into her coursework, but Mary Ann's face haunted her thoughts. On Thursday afternoon, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Ms. Calloway? This is Brenda Wilson from Child Protective Services. I conducted the home visit with the Thornton family yesterday." Michelle's heart raced. "Yes? What did you find?" "I wanted to update you as the reporting party." Ms. Wilson's voice was professional, revealing nothing. "We completed a thorough assessment, including a private interview with Mary and a review of her medical records. Dr. Thornton provided extensive documentation of her condition, including hospital records and specialist consultations. And the marks, consistent with the described medical condition, according to our consulting physician. Mary and appeared well cared for, properly nourished, and didn't disclose any concerns during her interview. Michelle closed her eyes. She wouldn't. She's scared. Ms. Calloway, I understand your concern, but we found no evidence to substantiate allegations of abuse or neglect. The case will be closed as unfounded. After the call ended, Michelle sat motionless on her futon, the phone still clutched in her hand. The system had failed, just as she'd feared it might. But one detail from Ms. Wilson's report nagged at her: hospital records. If Mary and Truly had this blood condition, there would be a history of treatment beyond Richard's home monitoring. Michelle needed to dig deeper, but she needed help. Her former roommate, Tyler Chin, worked in IT at Oak Ridge Memorial. They'd stayed friends after Michelle moved into her own place, occasionally meeting for coffee and complaints about their respective graduate programs. Tyler's insider access might provide the verification she needed. They met at a coffee shop far from campus and hospital, a dingy place with mismatched furniture and excellent espresso. Tyler arrived in scrubs, having come directly from his shift. "This better be important," he said, dropping into the chair across from Michelle. "I haven't slept in 36 hours. "I need a favor," Michelle said, keeping her voice low despite the grinding of the espresso machine. "It's about a patient at Oak Ridge Memorial." Tyler's expression immediately closed. "Whoa, I can't access patient records for you. That's like super illegal." "I'm not asking you to access them," Michelle clarified quickly. "I just need to know if someone is actually a patient there." An 8-year-old girl named Mary Ann Thornton. Her father is Dr. Richard Thornton. "The pain management guy?" Tyler frowned. "Why do you need to know about his kid?" Michelle weighed how much to reveal. "I'm concerned about her welfare. Her father claims she's being treated for a blood disorder, but I have reason to believe that's not true. And you want me to risk my job and possibly jail time to confirm this?" Tyler shook his head. "I can't, Michelle. Even checking if someone is a patient without a clinical reason is a HIPAA violation." "I think she's being abused, Tyler." Michelle leaned forward. "I saw marks on her body. Her father might be using her for some kind of pain research. I reported it to CPS, but they closed the case because of his medical documentation. I just need to know if that documentation is legitimate." Tyler's expression shifted from refusal to concern. That's messed up. I know I'm asking a lot, but this is a child who might be suffering." He drummed his fingers on the table, internal conflict evident on his face. "I can't directly access her records, but," he lowered his voice, "there's a way to see if she's in the system without opening any actual medical information. It would just tell me if she's an established patient in any department. That would help. If she's not registered as a hematology patient despite her father's claims, it's still risky," Tyler warned, "and it wouldn't be definitive. She could be seeing specialists elsewhere." "I understand, but it would be a start." Tyler sighed. "I'll see what I can find out. But Michelle, be careful. If you're right about this guy and he's doing something to his own kid, he's not someone you want to mess with." 2 days later, Michelle received a text from Tyler. No record of patient with that name in hematology. Only visits. Annual physicals in pediatrics. Last one 10 months ago. This convo never happened. The confirmation sent a chill through Michelle. Richard Thornton had lied about his daughter's medical condition, fabricated documentation convincing enough to fool CPS, and was almost certainly responsible for the marks on Mary Ann's body. But proving it would be nearly impossible without access to the girl. Michelle's opportunity came unexpectedly the following week. She was leaving the university library when she spotted a familiar figure on the elementary school playground across the street. Oak Ridge Elementary's recess was in full swing, and there, sitting alone under a tree with a book, was Mary Ann Thornton. Michelle hesitated only briefly before crossing the street. The playground was public, visible from the sidewalk. She approached the chain-link fence, watching as Mary Ann turned pages with the same careful precision she applied to everything. "Hello, Mary Ann," she called softly. The girl's head snapped up, eyes widening in recognition, and was that relief? She glanced around nervously before approaching the fence. "Miss Michelle," she whispered, "you shouldn't be here." "I was just passing by," Michelle said with a smile. "How are you feeling?" Mary Ann's fingers curled around the chain links. "Father said you made trouble. People came to our house asking questions. I was worried about you." The girl looked down. "They didn't believe you. Father showed them my medical records." "Mary Ann," Michelle said gently, "I know about the marks on your arms. I know they're not from a blood condition. I want to help you, but I need you to tell me the truth." Terror flashed across the child's face. "You don't understand. No one can help. Father is too important. Mother is too smart. They always win." "Not always," Michelle insisted. "Not if you tell someone what's really happening." Mary Ann's eyes filled with tears. "I can't. He'll know. He always knows when I've talked to someone." "What does he do to you, Mary Ann?" Michelle asked, her heart breaking at the girl's fear. "What are those marks?" For a long moment, Michelle thought Mary Ann wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly it was almost inaudible, she whispered, "Tests. He tests how much it hurts. Different things. To see how I react." The admission, spoken aloud for the first time, seemed to terrify the girl. She backed away from the fence. "I have to go. Please don't come back. They'll know." "Mary Ann, wait." But the girl was already running toward a teacher, leaving Michelle standing at the fence with the horrible confirmation of her worst fears. That evening, Michelle sat in Dr. Lee's office after hours, the full weight of Mary Ann's disclosure pressing on her chest like a stone. "She confirmed it," Michelle said, her voice hollow. "Richard Thornton is experimenting on his own daughter, testing pain responses, and CPS dismissed the case because of falsified medical records." Dr. Lee's face had grown increasingly grave as Michelle recounted her conversation with Mary Ann. If what you're saying is true, it's monstrous." "It is true. Mary Ann told me herself." "Did you record the conversation?" Michelle shook her head. "It happened so fast. I didn't even know I'd see her." "So it's still your word against theirs," Dr. Lee said, not unkindly. "And seeking her out at school could be construed as inappropriate contact. What was I supposed to do? Let it continue?" "No," Dr. Lee's voice firmed. "But we need to be strategic. If Richard Thornton is doing what you describe, he's not only abusing his daughter. He's violating every ethical standard in medicine and research. That makes this bigger than a typical CPS case." "What are you suggesting?" "We need more substantial evidence and a different approach." Dr. Lee began writing again, this time a list of names. "These are contacts at the State Department of Children and Families, above the local CPS level. And this," she added another name, "is an investigative reporter at the Boston Globe who specializes in medical ethics cases." Michelle stared at the list. "You believe me." "I believe you believe what you're saying," Dr. Lee clarified. "And I believe no accusation this serious should be dismissed without a thorough investigation, regardless of who it involves." She handed Michelle the list. "But Michelle, if you pursue this, you need to understand the risks. The Thorntons aren't just wealthy, they're connected. Diana Thornton has represented half the hospital board in various legal matters. Richard brings in millions in research grants." "I don't care who they are," Michelle said. "They're hurting a child. Then be prepared for them to fight back. Your academic standing, your reputation, possibly your future career, all could be targeted." Michelle thought of Mary Ann's thin arms with their perfect circular bruises, of her whispered confirmation of horrors no child should endure. "Some things matter more than career advancement, Dr. Lee." The professor smiled sadly. "Yes, they do." She glanced at her watch. "It's late. Take the list, think about your next steps. Whatever you decide, document everything, dates, times, exactly what was said. Evidence will be your only protection." Michelle was halfway to the door when Dr. Lee added, "And Michelle, be careful. Don't underestimate what people like the Thorntons might do when threatened." The warning followed Michelle home through darkening streets. In her apartment, she found herself checking the locks twice, drawing the blinds fully closed. Was she being paranoid or merely prudent? She opened her laptop to document her conversation with Mary, and while it was fresh in her memory, the screen flashed to life, showing her email open to an unread message from the Graduate Studies Office. Dear Ms. Calloway, this office has received a concerning report regarding your conduct. It has been alleged that you engaged in inappropriate contact with a minor child in violation of university ethics protocols and possibly state law. As per university policy, all fieldwork and research activities in your program are suspended pending investigation. Please report to the Office of Academic Integrity tomorrow at 9 a.m. to discuss this matter. Regards, Dr. William Marshall, Dean of Graduate Studies. Michelle stared at the screen in disbelief. The Thorntons had already begun their counterattack, moving with shocking speed to discredit her. Somehow, they'd learned about her contact with Mary and at the school. Had the girl been forced to tell them? Was someone watching her? The thought sent another chill through her. Her phone rang, displaying Dr. Lee's number. Michelle, her advisor said without preamble. I just received a call from the dean. The Thorntons have filed a formal complaint against you. I know. I got the email. This is moving faster than I anticipated. They're claiming you harassed their daughter at her school and have been attempting to manipulate her into making false statements. Michelle's laugh was bitter. That didn't take long. Listen to me. Dr. Lee's voice was urgent. When you meet with the Academic Integrity Committee tomorrow, stick to the facts. Don't speculate about motivations or make accusations you can't prove. The Thorntons are trying to discredit you before you can damage them. What about Mary Ann? While we're dealing with university politics, she's still in that house. One battle at a time, Dr. Lee counseled. If they destroy your credibility, you can't help her at all. After hanging up, Michelle sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, the weight of what she'd started pressing down on her. The Thorntons had resources, connections, and the benefit of their sterling reputation. She had a conversation through a fence and her own observations. It didn't seem like enough to save Mary, and a soft knock at her door startled her from these thoughts. Michelle approached cautiously, looking through the peephole to see Tyler shifting nervously in the hallway. What are you doing here? She asked after opening the door. He pushed past her into the apartment. Checking if you're okay. And bringing you this. He handed her a flash drive. I did something really stupid for you. If anyone finds out, I'll be fired and probably prosecuted. Michelle stared at the small device. What is it? I couldn't access Mary Ann's records directly, but I could access her father's research database. Tyler ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. Michelle, it's bad. Really bad. He's documenting these sessions with her, recording pain responses to various stimuli. It's all coded and anonymized in the hospital system, but he kept a separate log that cross-references. That's how I found it. Michelle's hand closed around the flash drive. This proves what he's doing. It proves he's conducting some kind of unauthorized research. The notes refer to Subject A, but never name Mary Ann directly. Still, the timing correlates with what you described. Tyler's face was pale. There are photographs, Michelle, of the marks, of the methods used to create them. It's systematic torture disguised as science. Thank you, Michelle whispered. The weight of the flash drive suddenly immense. This could save her. It might also put you in danger, Tyler warned. These people have resources. If they'll do this to their own kid, what would they do to protect themselves from exposure? The question lingered as Tyler left. Michelle connected the flash drive to her laptop with shaking hands. The contents were exactly as he described, clinically detailed documentation of pain response testing on Subject A, along with photographs that made her physically ill. Richard Thornton had created a parallel research program outside hospital oversight, using his own daughter as a test subject. The notes revealed a coldly scientific approach to inflicting precisely controlled pain, measuring physiological responses, and documenting recovery times. Diana's involvement was less direct but still evident. Legal language in consent forms, carefully worded to appear legitimate while actually meaning nothing. It was evidence beyond anything Michelle had hoped to find. It was also dangerous, to Tyler's career if it could be traced back to him, and potentially to Michelle's safety if the Thorntons discovered she had it. She copied the files to an encrypted section of her cloud storage, then to a second flash drive she hid in a hollowed-out textbook. The original she would take directly to Dr. Lee tomorrow after her meeting with the Academic Integrity Committee. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, interrupted by nightmares of Mary and's bruised arms reaching through fences, pleading for help that never came. Morning brought a gray drizzle that matched Michelle's mood as she dressed for her meeting. Professional but subdued charcoal skirt, ivory blouse, low heels. The uniform of someone unjustly accused but confident in their integrity. The main administration building was quiet at 8:45 a.m. Michelle took a seat outside the Office of Academic Integrity, the flash drive secure in her bag. Whatever the Thorntons had told the university, the evidence on that drive would vindicate her. At precisely 9 o'clock, the door opened to reveal Dr. Marshall, a thin man with perpetually pursed lips. "Ms. Calloway, come in." The office beyond held a small conference table where 3 other faculty members waited, the Academic Integrity Committee. Michelle recognized Dr. Abernathy from psychology, Dr. Rahman from ethics, and, unexpectedly, Diana Thornton. Michelle stopped short. "What is she doing here?" Dr. Marshall frowned. "Mrs. Thornton is here as the complainant. She has every right to participate in this hearing." Diana sat perfectly composed in a navy suit that probably cost more than Michelle's tuition. Her smile was ice. "Ms. Calloway, thank you for coming." The setup was clear now. This wasn't an impartial investigation, it was a trap. The Thorntons had connections even at the university level. "Please sit," Dr. Marshall directed. Michelle took the only remaining chair, directly across from Diana. "I'd like to state for the record that I object to Mrs. Thornton's presence. There's a clear conflict of interest." "Noted," Dr. Marshall said dismissively. "Now, we're here to address very serious allegations regarding your conduct. Mrs. Thornton has provided a sworn statement that you approached her daughter at school without permission, attempted to coerce the child into making false statements about her parents, and have engaged in a pattern of obsessive behavior regarding the family." "That's not what happened," Michelle said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We have a witness statement from a playground supervisor who observed you speaking to Mary and through the fence," Dr. Rahman added. "The school has security footage as well." "I did speak to her," Michelle acknowledged, "because I'm concerned for her welfare. I observed signs of abuse while babysitting for the family." Diana's expression hardened. "My daughter has a well-documented medical condition that Ms. Calloway is aware of. She's using her limited knowledge of psychology to construct a false narrative." "I've seen the marks on Mary Ann's body," Michelle countered. "They're not consistent with ITP or any blood disorder. They're deliberate, inflicted injuries. This is precisely the kind of reckless accusation we're concerned about," Diana said smoothly. "Ms. Calloway is using her position as a graduate student to lend credibility to defamatory claims." Dr. Abernathy frowned. "Ms. Calloway, did you file a report with Child Protective Services regarding your concerns?" "Yes, I did." "And what was the outcome of that investigation?" Michelle hesitated. "They closed the case. But they found no evidence of abuse," Diana interrupted. "Because there is none. My husband and I cooperated fully, provided complete medical records, and allowed a private interview with our daughter. The case was deemed unfounded." "Because you falsified medical records?" Michelle said, unable to contain herself. "Mary and isn't being treated for a blood disorder at Oak Ridge Memorial or anywhere else. I have confirmation of that." Diana raised a perfectly groomed eyebrow. "Are you suggesting you've illegally accessed my daughter's medical records?" The trap snapped shut. Michelle realized too late her mistake. "No, because that would be a federal offense," Diana continued, her attorney's precision evident, "as would coercing someone else to access those records on your behalf." Michelle felt cold. They knew about Tyler. Somehow they knew. Dr. Marshall cleared his throat. "Ms. Calloway, These are very serious matters. If you violated patient confidentiality laws in addition to ethical guidelines regarding contact with minors, I have evidence, Michelle interrupted, reaching for her bag. Actual evidence of what Dr. Thornton is doing to Mary Ann. Research files documenting abuse disguised as medical testing. Diana's composed mask slipped for just an instant, revealing something dangerous beneath. Any files Ms. Calloway claims to have would be stolen property, obtained illegally. They would be inadmissible in any proceeding and would only further demonstrate her willingness to break laws and ethical standards. This isn't a court, Mrs. Thornton, Michelle said, extracting the flash drive. This is about a child's safety. Before she could hand it to Dr. Marshall, the door opened. A university security officer entered, followed by Michelle's heart sank, a police detective in plain clothes. Michelle Calloway? The detective asked, though it clearly wasn't a question. I'm Detective Sawyer with Oak Ridge Police. I need you to come with me for questioning regarding allegations of harassment and potential computer crimes. The room tilted slightly. Am I under arrest? Not at this time. But we do need to speak with you immediately. Michelle looked from the detective to Diana Thornton, whose smile had returned, triumphant and terrible. The Thorntons had anticipated her every move, neutralizing her before she could expose them. Dr. Marshall, Michelle said, clutching the flash drive. I'd like to submit this as evidence before I go. The dean hesitated, looking uncomfortable. I don't think that would be appropriate, given the circumstances. This hearing is suspended pending the resolution of the criminal investigation. Diana stood, gathering her designer handbag. Thank you all for your time. The university's quick response to this matter is appreciated. She turned to Michelle. Ms. Calloway, I sincerely hope you get the help you need. The detective led Michelle from the building through a side exit, avoiding the main quad where students might witness the spectacle. As they reached his unmarked car, Michelle saw Dr. Lee hurrying across the lawn toward them, face tight with concern. Michelle, what's happening? She called. Dr. Lee, Michelle said, relief flooding her. The flash drive. The detective opened the car door. Ma'am, please step back. Ms. Calloway is coming with me for questioning. Dr. Lee approached anyway, ignoring the detective's warning. Michelle, don't say anything without an attorney. I'll contact legal aid. She lowered her voice. What flash drive? In my bag, Michelle whispered as the detective moved to intercept Dr. Lee. Evidence about Mary Ann Richards' research files. Understanding flashed in Dr. Lee's eyes, and she nodded almost imperceptibly before the detective stepped between them. That's enough, he said firmly. Dr. Lee, I respect your position, but interfering with a police investigation could have consequences. I'm simply advising my student of her rights, Dr. Lee replied, her tone professional but unyielding. Michelle, remember what I said. Say nothing until representation arrives. As the detective guided Michelle into the back seat, she caught a final glimpse of Dr. Lee standing in the rain, already pulling out her phone. Whatever happened next, Michelle wouldn't face it alone. The Oak Ridge Police Station was a modern building of glass and brick, designed to project transparency and approachability. The reality inside was less welcoming. Fluorescent lights, hard plastic chairs, and the distinct sense that the scales of justice were not balanced equally for all. Detective Sawyer led Michelle to an interview room and left her there for 43 minutes, a tactic she recognized from her criminology elective. Create anxiety, foster impatience, encourage impulsive statements when questioning finally begins. When he returned, he brought coffee she didn't ask for and a demeanor of forced casualness that didn't mask the hardness in his eyes. So, Ms. Calloway, he began after the preliminaries were recorded. Why don't you tell me about your interest in the Thornton family? Michelle met his gaze steadily. I'll wait for legal representation before answering questions. The detective nodded as if he'd expected this. That's your right. But I should let you know that we have witness statements, security footage, email records, and a documented pattern of behavior that's deeply concerning. He opened a folder, removing photographs of Michelle outside Marian's school, screenshots of her message to Diana, and what appeared to be telephone records. "You've made serious allegations against Dr. Thornton," Sawyer continued. "Allegations that were investigated and found to be without merit. Yet you persisted, contacting their daughter at school, attempting to access private medical records, and now making new accusations involving some kind of research misconduct." Michelle remained silent, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Here's what I think happened," Sawyer said, leaning back. "You're studying child psychology. You see a reserved, quiet child and your training tells you something must be wrong. You find normal bruising, which the parents explained and CPS verified as medical, but it fits your narrative, so you double down. When proper channels don't validate your suspicions, you take matters into your own hands." He paused, studying her. "That's not necessarily criminal. Misguided, potentially damaging to your academic career, but not criminal. What crosses the line is seeking out a minor without parental consent and potentially involving others in unauthorized access of protected medical information." The door opened, admitting a harried-looking woman in her 50s with a battered leather briefcase. "I'm Patricia Winters, from University Legal Aid. I'll be representing Ms. Calloway. No further questioning until I've consulted with my client." Detective Sawyer's displeasure was evident, but he nodded and left them alone. "Dr. Lee called me," Ms. Winters explained, setting her briefcase on the table. "She said this involves allegations against the Thornton family?" Michelle nodded, keeping her voice low. "I discovered evidence that Dr. Richard Thornton is conducting unauthorized pain response experiments on his 8-year-old daughter, Mary, and when I reported my concerns, the Thorntons used their connections to discredit me and shut down the investigation." Ms. Winters's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened. "That's an extraordinary claim. What evidence do you have?" "Research files copied from Dr. Thornton's database at the hospital. They document pain response testing on a subject that correlates with injuries I observed on Mary Ann." Michelle hesitated. "The files were obtained by someone with access to the hospital system. They're in a flash drive in my bag, which the police now have." "I see." Ms. Winters made a note. "That presents some complications. Evidence obtained illegally is problematic, both for your defense and for any case against the Thorntons. So Mary Ann just suffers while we worry about admissibility?" Michelle couldn't keep the frustration from her voice. "No," Ms. Winters said firmly. "We focus on your immediate legal situation first, then address your concerns about the child through proper channels. One battle at a time, Ms. Calloway." Dr. Lee had said the same thing. Michelle wondered how many battles Mary Ann could endure while adults moved cautiously through proper channels. Ms. Winters reviewed the situation methodically. The police hadn't arrested Michelle yet. They were investigating potential harassment and computer crimes based on the Thorntons' complaint. The university had suspended the academic integrity hearing pending the criminal investigation, effectively putting Michelle's academic standing in limbo. "For now, we focus on preventing charges from being filed," Ms. Winters concluded. "That means no further contact with the Thorntons or their daughter, no discussion of this matter with anyone except me or Dr. Lee, and absolutely no attempts to gather additional evidence." When Detective Sawyer returned, Ms. Winters took control of the interview. She clarified that Michelle had never accessed Mary Ann's medical records personally, had spoken to the child only once through a public fence, and had filed her CPS report through proper channels as both a concerned citizen and a mandated reporter in training. "My client acted in good faith based on her observations and training," Ms. Winters stated. "Any allegations of harassment or obsessive behavior are without merit." "What about the flash drive in her possession?" Sawyer countered. "Mrs. Thornton suggested it may contain illegally obtained information. My client has no knowledge of illegal activity. If you have specific evidence otherwise, charge her. If not, we're done here." Detective Sawyer's jaw tightened, but he had nothing concrete. After 2 more hours of circular questioning, Ms. Winters stood. "Unless you're arresting my client, we're leaving." They exited the police station into late afternoon sunshine that seemed mockingly cheerful. Ms. Winters handed Michelle her card. "They'll likely examine the flash drive. If it contains what you say it does, the situation becomes more complex. The information may help Mary but could implicate your friend who obtained it. Be prepared for that possibility. Michelle nodded, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. What happens now? You go home. You attend classes. You do nothing regarding the Thorntons. Ms. Winters's expression softened slightly. I know that's not what you want to hear, but rushing in will only make things worse. Dr. Lee was waiting in her office when Michelle arrived, her face lined with concern. What happened? Michelle collapsed into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. They're investigating me for harassment and possible computer crimes. They have the flash drive. Ms. Winters thinks they won't file charges yet. But she shook her head. Meanwhile, Mary is still in that house. Dr. Lee closed her office door and lowered her voice. Not for long. I made some calls. That reporter I mentioned? She's interested. Very interested. And she has contacts at the State Department of Children and Families who can override the local CPS determination. But without the flash drive, I made copies. Dr. Lee interrupted, a hint of smugness in her tone. When you were taken away, I went to the dean's office. Your bag was still there. I made copies before security collected your belongings as evidence. Michelle stared at her advisor in disbelief. You could lose your job. Be prosecuted. Some things matter more than career advancement, Dr. Lee said, echoing Michelle's earlier words. I've been teaching child psychology for 27 years. I've seen the system fail too many children. I couldn't let it happen again. Not when I could do something. Thank you, Michelle whispered. Don't thank me yet. The Thorntons will fight back harder when this escalates. And it will escalate. Dr. Lee's expression grew somber. The reporter, Vivian Marsh, wants to meet with you tonight. Off campus. Somewhere private. They arranged to meet at Dr. Lee's home, a modest Cape Cod in a quiet neighborhood far from Oak Ridge's affluent streets. Michelle arrived first, followed 20 minutes later by a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Vivian Marsh from the Boston Globe. Dr. Lee has shared the basics, Vivian said after preliminaries were concluded. And I've reviewed the files she provided. I need to hear everything from you, start to finish. Michelle recounted the entire story, the babysitting job, the disturbing marks, the confrontation with the Thorntons, the CPS dismissal, her conversation with Mary and at school, and the university's involvement. Vivian took meticulous notes, interrupting occasionally with pointed questions. Her focus sharpened when Michelle described the contents of the flash drive. These files are explosive, she confirmed. Documentation of systematic testing using various pain stimuli on a child subject, tracking physiological responses, recovery times, tolerance development. It's essentially torture framed as research. But there's no direct identification of Mary Michelle pointed out. It's all subjective. The dates correlate with your observations of her injuries. And there are photographs of the test sites that match your description of the marks you saw. Vivian tapped her notebook. It's enough to warrant a major investigation, especially given Dr. Thornton's position. So you'll write the story? Vivian's expression grew cautious. It's not that simple. The Thorntons will sue for defamation the moment this publishes. The Globe won't run it without corroboration beyond these files, which were obtained illegally. Michelle's hope deflated. So we're back where we started. Not quite. Vivian leaned forward. I have contacts at the state level who can initiate a higher-level investigation based on this information. They can obtain warrants the local CPS couldn't or wouldn't pursue. And if we can get Mary Ann's testimony. She's terrified, Michelle said. And she's constantly monitored. How could we even reach her? Leave that to the professionals, Vivian advised. But be prepared for things to get worse before they get better. Once the Thorntons realize a state investigation is coming, they'll intensify their efforts to discredit you. This prediction proved grimly accurate. The next morning, Michelle's department chair informed her that she was suspended from the graduate program pending the outcome of the investigations. By afternoon, she discovered her access to university buildings and systems had been revoked. That evening, she returned to her apartment to find an eviction notice. The building management had received credible reports of illegal activity from an unnamed source. The Thorntons were systematically dismantling her life. Dr. Lee remained her only ally at the university, maintaining contact despite implicit warnings from the administration to distance herself from the controversy. Tyler had gone silent, likely fearing for his own job and freedom. 3 days after her meeting with Vivian, Michelle woke to pounding on her door at 6:15 a.m. 2 uniformed officers stood in the hallway. "Michelle Calloway? We have a warrant for your arrest." The charges were more serious than she'd anticipated. Criminal harassment, stalking of a minor, conspiracy to violate medical privacy laws, and attempted coercion of a child. The bail was set deliberately high, $50,000, far beyond what a graduate student could hope to afford. Ms. Winters appeared at the arraignment, looking grim. "The Thorntons are pushing hard. Diana is personally consulting with the district attorney's office. Can they do that? Isn't that a conflict of interest? She's not officially representing the DA, just offering her expertise." Ms. Winters's disgust was evident. "The judge who set your bail plays golf with Richard Thornton. Welcome to small-town justice." Michelle spent 2 nights in county lockup before Dr. Lee somehow arranged bail. Back in her increasingly bare apartment, she'd been packing in anticipation of the eviction. Michelle found her advisor waiting with Vivian Marsh. "Things are moving," Vivian said without preamble. "The State Department of Children and Families has opened an investigation based on the evidence I provided. They've obtained warrants for all of Dr. Thornton's research materials and Mary Ann's complete medical history. The Thorntons will have cleaned everything up by now," Michelle said, despair creeping into her voice. "Perhaps. But Richard isn't the only one who kept records." Vivian's smile was tight. "I found his research assistant, a postdoc who's been documenting his concerns about the project for months. He didn't know Subject A was Mary Ann, but he suspected the research was unethical. He's agreed to testify." It was the first glimmer of hope in days. "What about Mary Ann? Is she safe?" Dr. Lee and Vivian exchanged glances. "That's where things get complicated," Dr. Lee said carefully. "The Thorntons appear to be preparing to leave town. They've taken Mary Ann out of school, citing a family emergency. Richard has requested an extended leave from the hospital. They're running," Michelle realized, horror washing over her. "They're going to take her and disappear. State police are monitoring them," Vivian assured her. "They can't move on the Thorntons yet without more evidence. But they won't let them vanish with Mary Ann either." Yet the machinery of justice ground slowly, while the Thorntons moved with practiced efficiency. Over the following days, Michelle watched helplessly as her criminal case advanced while the child welfare investigation faced roadblock after roadblock. The Thorntons' lawyer challenged the warrants, their political connections mysteriously delayed paperwork, and Diana's legal expertise found loopholes at every turn. A week after Michelle's arrest, Dr. Lee arrived at her apartment with news that made her blood run cold. The Thorntons filed for an emergency relocation order for Mary Ann, citing harassment and threats. It was granted this morning by Judge Harmon. "The same judge who set my bail," Michelle noted bitterly. "Yes, they're legally permitted to leave the state with her now. They're claiming it's for her psychological well-being, to escape the trauma of the investigations." Michelle paced her half-packed living room. "This can't be happening. The system is supposed to protect children." "The system is made of people," Dr. Lee said quietly. "People with biases, blind spots, and vulnerabilities to influence. The Thorntons have spent years cultivating the perfect facade and the perfect network of protectors. So Mary Ann just disappears with them? Becomes another statistic?" Fury and helplessness warred within Michelle. "There has to be something we can do." Dr. Lee hesitated, then removed an envelope from her bag. "This arrived at my office today. No return address." Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address in Cape Cod and a date, tomorrow. The handwriting was childish but neat. "It's for Mary Ann," Michelle whispered. "It has to be. But how did she send this? They're watching her every move." "I don't know. But if the Thorntons are planning to leave with her tomorrow, The implication hung in the air. This might be the last chance to help Mary, and before she disappeared into a new life with new doctors, new schools, and the same hidden abuse. "I can't go," Michelle said, the realization hitting her hard. "I'm under court order to stay away from the Thorntons and Mary Ann. If I'm caught anywhere near that address, I'll be thrown back in jail and any chance of helping her will be gone." Dr. Lee nodded. "I know. That's why I've already contacted Vivian and her sources at the state DCF. They're mobilizing to intercept the Thorntons before they can leave with Mary Ann." Hope, fragile but persistent, blossomed in Michelle's chest. "Will they get there in time?" "We have to believe they will," Dr. Lee said, though uncertainty tinged her voice. "The system fails too often, but sometimes, when enough good people push hard enough, it works." The waiting was excruciating. Michelle couldn't sleep that night, imagining Mary and packing her few treasured possessions, preparing to be taken away to another perfectly maintained prison disguised as a home. Would the next person who noticed the marks on her arms have the courage to speak up? Would there be anyone to notice at all? Morning came with leaden skies and a steady drizzle. Michelle's phone remained silent as the hours crept by. Dr. Lee had promised to call the moment she heard anything from Vivian or the state authorities. By noon, the silence had become unbearable. Michelle tried calling Dr. Lee, but the call went straight to voicemail. She paced her apartment, checking news sites compulsively for any mention of the Thorntons. At 2:17 p.m., a text arrived from an unknown number. "They're gone. House empty. Missed them." Michelle's heart plummeted. They'd failed. The Thorntons had escaped with Mary and, likely to another state where they'd establish a new perfect facade while the abuse continued behind closed doors. She was still staring at the message when her phone rang. Dr. Lee at last. "What happened?" Michelle demanded, skipping any greeting. "They moved faster than anyone anticipated," Dr. Lee explained, her voice tight with frustration. "By the time the state team arrived with warrants, the house was empty. Neighbors said they left before dawn. So they're gone. They won." Michelle sank onto her futon, defeat washing over her. "Not exactly." Something in Dr. Lee's tone made Michelle sit up straighter. "The state police put out an alert. The Thorntons' car was spotted at a gas station near the Massachusetts-New Hampshire border. They've been detained. And Mary Ann? She's safe, being evaluated at Children's Hospital in Boston." Dr. Lee's voice softened. "She asked for you, Michelle." Tears sprang to Michelle's eyes. "She did. Yes. Apparently she told the officers that Miss Michelle saw the circles and believed me when no one else did. That's what broke the case wide open." Mary Ann finally felt safe enough to speak. Relief made Michelle lightheaded. "What happens now?" "Richard has been arrested for child abuse and medical ethics violations. Diana is negotiating with prosecutors, probably turning on her husband to save herself. And the judge who approved their emergency relocation is facing an ethics inquiry. And my case, being reviewed in light of the new evidence. Ms. Winters thinks the charges will be dropped now that Mary Ann has confirmed your suspicions were correct." Dr. Lee paused. "It's not over, Michelle. The legal process will take months, maybe years. Mary Ann has a long recovery ahead. But the truth is out now. She's safe. The truth. After so many layers of deception, manipulation, and obstruction, the simple truth had finally emerged. A child was being hurt, and now she wasn't. It didn't undo the damage to Michelle's reputation or academic standing, but those things seemed trivial compared to Mary Ann's freedom. "Can I see her?" Michelle asked. "Not yet. There are still legal hurdles." Dr. Lee's tone grew warmer. "But she left something for you. The state caseworker is bringing it to my office this afternoon. Can you come by around for?" Michelle arrived at Dr. Lee's office to find her advisor in conversation with a kind-faced woman who introduced herself as Karen Martinez from the State Department of Children and Families. "Ms. Calloway, I want to thank you personally," Ms. Martinez said, shaking Michelle's hand firmly. "Without your persistence, we might never have learned what was happening to Mary Ann." "Is she really okay?" Michelle asked the question that mattered most. Ms. Martinez's expression grew somber. Physically, she's stable. The injuries will heal. Emotionally, she sighed. That's a longer journey. But she has excellent support now, and she's showing remarkable resilience. Where will she go? For now, to a specialized foster placement while we locate her maternal grandmother in Oregon. Early indications are that the grandmother had been trying to maintain contact with Mary, and for years but was systematically blocked by the Thorntons. From her bag, Ms. Martinez withdrew a blue fabric-bound book that Michelle instantly recognized. Mary and sketchbook. She insisted you should have this, Ms. Martinez explained, handing it to Michelle. She said you were the only one who really saw her drawings. Michelle accepted the book with trembling hands. Opening it revealed the familiar detailed sketches of birds and trees, but also new drawings. A figure with curly hair standing protectively beside a small blonde girl. On the last page, in careful printing, Mary had written, "Thank you for seeing the circles and believing me. I'm going to be an artist when I grow up now." It was a promise of a future that had seemed impossible just days before. Michelle traced the words with her finger, tears blurring her vision. "Tell her I believe in her art," she said softly, "and that I always will." The road ahead remained complicated. The criminal cases against the Thorntons would be long and difficult. Michelle's academic future hung in limbo, her reputation tarnished by the very act of standing up for what was right. But in that moment, holding Mary and sketchbook with its testament to hope and resilience, Michelle knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. Some battles were worth fighting, no matter the cost. Some truths needed to be spoken, no matter who tried to silence them. And sometimes, the most important thing in the world was simply believing a child when they showed you their wounds, visible and invisible alike. As she left Dr. Lee's office into the clearing afternoon, Michelle felt lighter than she had in weeks. The shadows were receding, bit by bit, allowing light to reach places long kept in darkness. It wasn't a perfect ending. Real life rarely offered those, but it was a beginning. For Mary and for herself, and for the truth that had finally broken its silence. 3 months after the Thorntons' arrest, Michelle sat on a hard wooden bench outside Courtroom C of the Suffolk County Courthouse. The grand old building with its marble columns and echoing halls had become familiar territory during the preliminary hearings, yet it still felt imposing, a physical manifestation of a system that could either deliver justice or perpetuate harm. Her fingers traced the worn blue fabric of Mary and sketchbook, now constantly in her possession. The morning's hearing would determine whether Richard Thornton would stand trial for multiple felony charges of child abuse and unethical medical experimentation. Diana Thornton had already accepted a plea agreement in exchange for testimony against her husband, a decision that had fractured Oak Ridge's social circles into warring camps. Nervous, Dr. Lee appeared beside Michelle, offering a paper cup of courthouse cafeteria coffee. Michelle accepted it gratefully. A little, mostly for Mary Ann. She's supposed to testify today. I heard. How is she doing with her grandmother? In the months since being placed with her maternal grandmother, Patricia Wilson, in temporary custody, Mary Ann had shown remarkable progress. Weekly video calls allowed Michelle to witness the gradual unfurling of the girl's personality, like a tightly closed bud slowly opening toward the sun. "Better every time we talk," Michelle said, a small smile warming her face. "She's taking art lessons now. Real ones, not just drawing in secret. And her grandmother enrolled her in a therapy program specifically for children who've experienced trauma." Dr. Lee nodded approvingly. "Patricia sounds like exactly what Mary Ann needs. Loving but protective." "She is." Michelle sipped the bitter coffee. "She's also determined to see Richard pay for what he did. That's why they came back for the hearing." The double doors at the end of the corridor opened, revealing Patricia Wilson, a sturdy woman in her 60s with Mary and same blonde hair, now streaked with silver, and beside her, Mary and herself. The girl wore a simple blue dress with a cardigan, her hair pulled back with a headband rather than the severe braid the Thorntons had preferred. The change in her appearance was striking, but more remarkable was the change in her demeanor. She still moved carefully, still watched her surroundings with cautious eyes, but there was a straightness to her posture that suggested dignity rather than fear. When she spotted Michelle, a genuine smile spread across her face, transformed her completely. "Miss Michelle," she called, her voice still soft but no longer a whisper. Michelle stood as Mary and approached, unsure of the protocol for their first in-person meeting since the rescue. The girl solved this dilemma by stepping forward and wrapping her thin arms around Michelle's waist in a quick, fierce hug before stepping back with a blush. "I brought new drawings to show you," she said, holding up a folder decorated with carefully drawn butterflies. "Grandma Patricia says I might be good enough for art school someday." "I have no doubt you will be," Michelle replied, her heart constricting at this simple statement of future plans. A luxury Mary and hadn't dared indulge before. Patricia Wilson approached, extending her hand to Michelle. "So you're the stubborn one who wouldn't give up," she said, her grip firm and warm. "Mary and talks about you constantly. The brave lady who saw the circles." Michelle shook her head. "I just did what anyone should have done." "But they didn't," Patricia said, her voice dropping. "For years, I tried to maintain contact with Mary and Diana blocked every attempt, claimed I was unstable. When I pushed harder, Richard threatened legal action. I gave up too easily." Her eyes, so like Mary Ann's, clouded with regret. "If I'd fought harder—" "You're fighting now," Michelle interrupted gently. "That's what matters." Before Patricia could respond, a side door opened and Vivian Marsh emerged, looking harried but determined. The reporter had become an unexpected ally in the months since the case broke. Her series of articles exposing not only the Thorntons' abuse, but also the systemic failures that had allowed it to continue. "They're ready," Vivian said. The defense tried one last motion to exclude Mary Ann's testimony, but the judge denied it. Mary Ann's hand slipped into her grandmother's, her knuckles whitening. Patricia squeezed back reassuringly. "You only need to tell the truth, sweetheart," she said, "just like we practiced." Mary Ann nodded solemnly. "I know. I'm not scared of him anymore." The quiet confidence in those words brought unexpected tears to Michelle's eyes. This child, who had endured unimaginable treatment at the hands of those meant to protect her, had found a courage many adults never achieved. The courtroom was already crowded when they entered. Local media, legal observers, and a surprising number of Oak Ridge residents occupied the gallery. Michelle noticed several hospital staff, likely there to support Richard, and a contingent of university personnel, including the dean who had suspended her pending the resolution of the harassment charges that had since been dismissed. At the defense table sat Richard Thornton, his normally immaculate appearance slightly diminished by months in custody. His attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, leaned close, whispering urgently. Richard's eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Mary and before darting away. The prosecuting attorney, a formidable woman named Judith Patel, greeted their small group at the prosecution table. "Mary Ann, you'll wait outside with the victim advocate until we call you. Okay? Everyone else can sit behind me." Michelle, Dr. Lee, Patricia, and Vivian found seats in the first row as the proceedings began. The judge, a silver-haired woman with penetrating eyes, called the court to order and addressed the preliminary matters with brisk efficiency. When the time came for opening statements, Prosecutor Patel approached the jury box with measured steps. "This case," she began, "is about the most fundamental betrayal of trust imaginable. Dr. Richard Thornton, a man sworn to first do no harm, conducted painful, traumatic experiments on his own child, experiments designed not to treat any condition, but to advance his research into pain responses. He used his medical knowledge not to heal, but to hurt, systematically and repeatedly, a defenseless 8-year-old girl who had no choice but to endure his tests. He falsified medical records to cover his actions, intimidated those who raised concerns, and fled when authorities finally closed in." She turned to indicate Richard. "The evidence will show that the defendant created an elaborate fiction, a rare blood disorder, to explain away the marks of his experiments. He documented everything with clinical precision, treating his daughter as nothing more than Subject A. The testimony you will hear, including from the defendant's own wife and research assistant, will reveal not a momentary lapse in judgment, but years of calculated abuse disguised as science. When you have heard all the evidence, we are confident you will find Dr. Thornton guilty of all charges. The defense attorney, Martin Goldstein, countered with equally measured rhetoric. He characterized Richard as a dedicated physician whose research would have benefited countless patients suffering from chronic pain. He suggested that Diana's testimony was motivated by vindictiveness, that the research assistant had misinterpreted legitimate medical procedures, and, most disturbingly, that Mary and herself was confused about routine medical care provided by a father concerned for her well-being. Michelle watched the jurors' faces during this last claim, noting the skepticism that crossed several expressions. Good. They weren't buying the misunderstood genius narrative. The first witness called was Diana Thornton. She entered the courtroom like an actress taking the stage, her designer suit and perfect makeup a stark contrast to her husband's diminished appearance. Michelle had to admire the performance. Diana projected just the right balance of remorse and cooperation, presenting herself as another victim of Richard's manipulation rather than an active participant in Mary Ann's abuse. Mrs. Thornton, Prosecutor Patel began after the preliminaries. When did you first become aware of your husband's experimentation on your daughter? Diana dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. It began gradually. Richard told me Mary Ann had a rare condition that required regular monitoring. He said he could do the tests himself, sparing her the trauma of hospital visits. I trusted his medical judgment. And when did you realize these tests were actually experiments? About 2 years ago, I found his research notes. When I confronted him, he convinced me it was legitimate treatment that also provided valuable research data. He said many medical advances came from physician parents treating their own children. Diana's voice cracked artfully. I was wrong to believe him, terribly wrong. Did you ever witness these tests? No. Richard conducted them in his home office when I wasn't present. I saw the marks afterward, but he always had a medical explanation. Did you help cover up these activities? Diana hesitated, likely weighing how much to admit under her plea agreement. I assisted with the documentation. Richard said we needed consistent medical records in case anyone questioned Mary Ann's condition. By assisted with documentation, do you mean you helped falsify medical records? Yes, Diana admitted softly. I used my legal expertise to create documents that would withstand scrutiny. And when Michelle Calloway raised concerns about marks she observed on Mary Ann, what did you do? Diana's gaze flickered toward Michelle. We dismissed her. Richard said she was overreacting to routine medical monitoring. When she persisted, we took steps to discredit her. What kind of steps? Richard contacted the university. I spoke to colleagues at the district attorney's office. We filed complaints to make her seem unstable and obsessive. Diana looked down. We were protecting ourselves, not Mary Ann. I will regret that for the rest of my life. The defense cross-examination was brutal. Goldstein hammered at inconsistencies in Diana's story, highlighted her own culpability, and suggested she had orchestrated the entire case to escape prosecution herself. Diana maintained her composure throughout, but her carefully constructed victim narrative began to fray under the onslaught. By the time she was dismissed, the jury had witnessed a woman not coerced but complicit, a partner in abuse who had turned against her husband only when exposure became inevitable. The next witness was Dr. James Chun, Richard's research assistant at Oak Ridge Memorial. The young postdoc appeared nervous but resolute as he described his growing concerns about Richard's secretive pain management study. Dr. Thornton compartmentalized the research, he explained. I was only allowed to analyze anonymized data, but the patterns were troubling. The subject was clearly experiencing increasing levels of pain stimuli over time, beyond what any ethics committee would approve. Did you raise these concerns? Prosecutor Patel asked. Twice. The first time, Dr. Thornton said the protocols had been approved through a private research foundation. The second time, he threatened my position and future recommendations if I created problems. When did you learn the test subject was Mary Ann Thornton? Not until after Dr. Thornton's arrest. When I saw the news reports, Dr. Chen's professional demeanor cracked. I had been analyzing data from experiments performed on a child. His child. I felt physically ill. The defense tried to portray Dr. Chun as an ambitious junior researcher jealous of Richard's success, but the young doctor's evident distress and clear testimony remained compelling. Throughout the morning, Michelle listened as witness after witness pieced together the infrastructure of deception the Thorntons had built. Hospital administrators who had noticed discrepancies but deferred to Richard's reputation, colleagues who had glimpsed concerning patterns but remained silent, teachers who had observed Mary Ann's concerning behaviors but accepted the Thorntons' explanations. The system's failure was as much on trial as Richard himself. After lunch, Prosecutor Patel called the witness everyone had been waiting for. The people call Mary Ann Thornton. A hush fell over the courtroom as Mary Ann entered, accompanied by a victim advocate. She looked tiny approaching the witness stand, but her steps were steady. After being sworn in, she sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze fixed on Prosecutor Patel rather than her father. Mary and Patel began gently. Can you tell us about the marks on your arms that Michelle Calloway noticed when she was babysitting you? Mary Ann nodded. Father called them test sites. He said they were helping sick people by showing how different things hurt. What kind of tests did your father do? He had different tools. Mary Ann's voice remained steady, though quieter. Metal circles he would heat up and press on my skin. Needles that went different depths. A device that made electrical zaps. She recited these horrors with the detachment of a child who had normalized the abnormal. He wrote down numbers after each one. How much it hurt and how long it took to stop hurting. Did these tests happen regularly? Every Tuesday and Friday evening, when Mother was at her book club or yoga class. Mary Ann's precision was heartbreaking. The schedule of abuse marked on a mental calendar no child should have to keep. Did the tests hurt? For the first time, Mary Ann's composure wavered. Yes, sometimes so much I would cry, but Father said crying ruined the data. What did he do if you cried? He would stop the test and say we had to start over another day. If I was good and didn't cry, I could have drawing time afterward. Michelle closed her eyes briefly, imagining Mary and enduring pain in silence to earn the right to do what every child should freely enjoy. Mary and, did you ever tell anyone about these tests? The girl shook her head. Father said no one would believe me, that he was an important doctor and I was just a little girl who didn't understand medicine. And that if I told, I would be taken away from them and put somewhere much worse. Why did you finally tell Michelle Calloway the truth? Mary Ann's gaze shifted to Michelle for the first time. Because she saw the circles and didn't pretend they weren't there. And she said she would help me even though it was scary. No further questions, Your Honor. Defense Attorney Goldstein approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mary Ann, isn't it possible you misunderstood what your father was doing? That these were actually treatments for your condition? Mary Ann's brow furrowed. I don't have a condition. Father made that up. But you're not a doctor, are you? You wouldn't necessarily understand medical procedures. I understand what hurts, Mary Ann replied simply. And I understand when someone writes down how much I hurt instead of making it stop. Goldstein tried several more angles, attempting to sow doubt about Mary Ann's understanding or memory. But the girl's straightforward responses consistently returned to the undeniable reality. Her father had deliberately hurt her, repeatedly, systematically, for his own purposes. When she was finally excused, Mary Ann walked directly to her grandmother without looking at her father. As she passed the prosecution table, she paused briefly beside Michelle. I didn't cry, she whispered. Pride and residual pain mingled in her voice. You did perfectly, Michelle whispered back. I'm so proud of you. The final witness of the day was Michelle herself. Walking to the witness stand, she felt Richard's gaze following her, calculating, assessing, as if she were another subject whose responses needed measuring. She kept her eyes forward, focusing on the oath and the familiar questions establishing her background and credibility. Prosecutor Patel led her through the events chronologically. The babysitting job, the discovery of the marks, the confrontation with the Thorntons, the obstacles she'd faced in reporting her concerns, and the eventually successful intervention. Ms. Calloway, Why did you persist in your efforts to help Mary, and despite the professional and personal costs to yourself? Michelle considered the question carefully. Because what I saw on her arms told a clear story of deliberate harm. Once I knew that, walking away wasn't an option, regardless of who was responsible or what happened to me. Even when your academic career was threatened, when you faced criminal charges. Even then, Michelle met Richard's gaze directly for the first time. Mary and needed someone to believe her, to see what was happening and act, not look away because it was difficult or inconvenient. The defense cross-examination targeted Michelle's qualifications, suggesting she had overstepped her training and inserted herself into the Thornton family due to an overzealous nature. Goldstein repeatedly emphasized that she was only a graduate student and not a licensed psychologist, attempting to diminish the credibility of her observations. You formed a rather dramatic theory based on some bruising, didn't you? Goldstein challenged. Isn't it possible you saw what you expected to see because of your studies in child abuse? I saw circular marks and patterns that matched no accidental injury or medical condition, Michelle replied evenly. I observed a child showing clear signs of trauma, and when I raised concerns, I encountered resistance that far exceeded a normal parent's defensive reaction. But you had no proof of experimentation until your friend illegally accessed Dr. Thornton's files. Correct? I had Mary Ann's physical injuries, behavioral indicators, and eventually her own words. The files confirmed what was already evident. As Michelle stepped down from the witness stand, she felt a curious lightness. She had done everything she could to protect Mary and had told the truth despite all efforts to silence her. The outcome was now in the jury's hands. The remaining days of the trial brought expert witnesses who analyzed Richard's research methodology and medical professionals who documented Mary Ann's injuries. Richard himself never took the stand, a decision that spoke volumes to the jury. On the fifth day, closing arguments crystallized the competing narratives. The prosecution portrayed Richard as a man who had betrayed every oath, as a doctor, a researcher, and a father, to pursue his ambitions without ethical constraints. The defense continued to suggest misunderstanding and exaggeration, but their arguments rang hollow after the parade of evidence and testimony. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with their verdict. On the count of child abuse in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of unethical human experimentation, how do you find? Guilty. Count after count, the response remained the same. Richard Thornton stood impassive as his freedom disappeared, showing emotion only when the final verdict was read and he was taken into custody to await sentencing. Outside the courthouse, Michelle stood with Dr. Lee, Patricia, and Mary, and as Vivian spoke to a cluster of reporters. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and new beginnings. What happens now? Mary Ann asked, looking up at her grandmother. Now we go home to Oregon, Patricia replied. We build a new life, and you never have to see him again. Mary Ann nodded, processing this. Then she turned to Michelle. Will you visit us? Grandma Patricia said you could stay in our guest room. I'd like that very much, Michelle said, surprised by the invitation. Not right away, Patricia clarified. Mary Ann needs time to settle in, establish routines. But perhaps for Thanksgiving, we make excellent pumpkin pie. The simple domestic normalcy of the invitation nearly undid Michelle. After months of crisis and conflict, the prospect of holiday pie with Mary and in a safe, loving home seemed miraculous. I'll bring my appetite, she promised. As they said their goodbyes, Mary Ann pressed something into Michelle's hand, a folded sheet of drawing paper. Don't look until we're gone, she whispered. It's not finished yet. Michelle honored the request, waiting until Mary Ann and Patricia had departed in their taxi before unfolding the paper. The drawing showed 2 figures standing before an easel, one small and blonde, one taller with curly hair. Both were smiling. Across the top, in careful lettering, Mary Ann had written, "My future art teacher." Dr. Lee peered over her shoulder. Looks like you've got a career path mapped out for you. Michelle laughed softly, tears blurring the image. Apparently so. Speaking of careers, Dr. Lee said, her tone shifting to something more serious. The university's disciplinary committee meets tomorrow to review your reinstatement. I'll be there to advocate for you, but you should be prepared for lingering resistance. The Thorntons made powerful friends, and some of them are still in positions of influence. I know. Michelle carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into Mary Ann's sketchbook. But whatever happens with my degree, I've learned something more valuable than any classroom could teach. What's that? That systems fail, but individuals don't have to. That one person willing to see the truth and speak it can make all the difference. She smiled at her mentor. And that I'm not the only one willing to do that. Dr. Lee squeezed her shoulder. No, you're not. Remember that in the difficult days ahead. 2 years later, the Community Arts Center in Portland, Oregon was buzzing with activity as parents and supporters gathered for the annual student exhibition. Michelle adjusted the display lighting for the third time, wanting each piece to receive the perfect illumination. They look wonderful, Patricia said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of sparkling cider. The whole show does. You've done remarkable work here. Michelle accepted the glass gratefully. The kids did the work. I just provided space and supplies, and guidance, and confidence, and a safe place to express themselves. Patricia's tone brooked no argument. Don't diminish what you've created here, Michelle. What she had created was indeed special. After completing her master's degree, delayed but not derailed by the Thornton case, Michelle had relocated to Portland. With a small inheritance from her grandmother and a grant from a foundation supporting arts therapy for traumatized children, she had established the Safe Harbor Art Center. The program offered classes and therapy through creative expression, with special emphasis on children who had experienced abuse or neglect. Mary Ann, now 10, had been her first student and remained her most dedicated. The girl's artistic talent had flourished with proper nurturing, her previously hidden creativity exploding onto canvases with joyful abandon. Where is our star artist? Michelle asked, scanning the growing crowd. Hiding in the supply closet with stage fright, Patricia said with a fond smile. Would you talk to her? She listens to you differently than to me. Michelle found Mary Ann exactly where her grandmother had indicated, sitting cross-legged amid bottles of tempera paint and stacks of construction paper. Her blonde hair was longer now, held back with a rainbow-patterned headband, and she wore a dress she had designed herself, covered in hand-painted flowers. Pre-show jitters? Michelle asked, sitting beside her on the floor, mindful of her own more formal attire. Mary Ann nodded, fidgeting with a paintbrush. What if they don't like my paintings? What if they think they're weird or scary? Several of Mary Ann's pieces dealt directly with her trauma. Abstract representations of pain and fear giving way to healing and hope. They were powerful, especially coming from someone so young, but not everyone would understand their origins. Art isn't about pleasing others, Michelle reminded her gently. It's about expressing your truth. And your truth, even the difficult parts, deserves to be seen. Mary Ann considered this. Like how you told your truth about me, even when it was hard, exactly like that. Were you scared? Terrified, Michelle admitted. But being scared doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. Sometimes it means the opposite, that what you're doing matters so much it's worth being afraid for. Mary Ann nodded slowly. My therapist says the scary feelings get smaller when I put them in my art, that they lose power when I control how to show them. She's very wise. So are you. Mary Ann stood, brushing dust from her dress. Okay, I'm ready now. They walked hand in hand to the main gallery where Mary Ann's section awaited. 8 canvases arranged chronologically, telling a story of darkness receding and light emerging. The centerpiece was a large painting titled simply Circles. It showed rings of various sizes and colors, initially dark and tight, gradually expanding and brightening, ultimately transforming into a spectrum of overlapping rainbows. It was beautiful, complex, and profoundly honest. Pain transformed but not forgotten, acknowledged but not defining. As visitors began to view the exhibition, Mary Ann stood proudly beside her work, answering questions with growing confidence. Michelle watched from a distance, giving her space to claim this moment fully. Dr. Lee appeared at her side, having flown in specially for the exhibition. "She's remarkable," the professor said, nodding toward Mary Ann. "So are you, for that matter." "I just did what needed doing," Michelle demurred. "Which is precisely what makes it remarkable." Dr. Lee sipped her cider thoughtfully. "Do you ever think about the Thorntons?" Michelle considered the question. Richard Thornton was serving a 20-year sentence. Diana, after her plea deal, had received 5 years, of which she had served 18 months before being paroled. She had moved to Arizona and, according to Vivian's occasional updates, was rebuilding her life under her maiden name, working at a small law firm specializing in contract review. "Occasionally," Michelle admitted. "Less and less as time passes." "And do you regret any of it? The career disruption, the legal battles, the lingering effects on your professional reputation?" Michelle watched as Mary and laughed at something a gallery visitor said, her face alight with joy and pride. "Not for a second." Dr. Lee nodded. "I thought as much. That's why I brought this." She handed Michelle an envelope bearing the Westfield University seal. "The psychology department is establishing a new doctoral concentration in childhood trauma and advocacy. We'd like you to consider returning to lead it." Michelle stared at the letter in surprise. "Me? But my master's thesis barely passed after everything that happened." "Because certain faculty members couldn't separate their personal connections to the Thorntons from their academic judgment," Dr. Lee said bluntly. "Those individuals have since retired or moved on. The new department chair recognizes that your practical experience is precisely what our program needs." The offer was tempting. Returning to academia, helping shape a new generation of child advocates, applying her hard-won wisdom in a broader context. Yet as she looked around the art center she had built, at the children proudly displaying their work, at Marian's transformation from frightened victim to confident creator, Michelle knew her path lay here, at least for now. "I'm honored," she said sincerely, "but I think I'm exactly where I need to be." Dr. Lee smiled, unsurprised. "I thought you might say that. The offer remains open whenever you're ready. In the meantime, we'd welcome you as a guest lecturer once or twice a semester. Your perspective would be invaluable to our students." "That I can do," Michelle agreed. As the evening progressed, Marian's artwork attracted significant attention, including from the director of a prestigious youth arts program who expressed interest in offering her a scholarship. The girl's face glowed with each word of praise, each moment of recognition. Near the end of the exhibition, Mary Ann found Michelle adjusting the refreshment table. "Someone wants to buy circles," she announced, wide-eyed with disbelief. "They're offering $300. "That's wonderful," Michelle said, genuinely impressed. "What do you think? Do you want to sell it?" Mary Ann shook her head decisively. "No, that one's not for selling. It's the story of us. Us. You and me. The circles that were bad, and how you helped make them into something else." Mary Ann traced a pattern on the tablecloth, suddenly shy. "I thought maybe it could hang in your office here, so everyone who comes for help can see that bad things can become beautiful things, if the right person helps you." Michelle swallowed the lump in her throat. "I would be honored to display it." Later that night, after the guests had departed and the center was quiet, Michelle stood alone before circles, studying its intricate patterns. The painting captured something profound about trauma and healing, how the wounds themselves don't vanish but can be incorporated into something new and whole, perhaps even beautiful in its complexity. She thought about the circle of events that had brought her here. A babysitting job, marks on a child's arms, a choice to speak instead of remain silent. How that one moment of seeing and believing had altered the trajectory of multiple lives, including her own. Outside, spring rain fell gently on Portland streets. Inside, surrounded by art that testified to resilience and transformation, Michelle Calloway felt the rightness of her place in the world. Not as a savior or a hero, but as one link in a chain of seeing and speaking, of refusing to accept darkness when light was possible. In Marian's painting, the circles expanded outward, creating ripples of color and light that extended beyond the canvas edges. a visual representation of how truth, once spoken, continues to move outward in ways the speaker may never fully know. It was enough. It was everything.